Hello everyone, so excited to be with you on our fourth video. So if you haven't seen the third one, which is Ecuador, please just stop listening and go back to the third one and then come back. If you've done that, hello again. So this one is going to be very exciting. We're not going to necessarily be going that much deep into Matrix. I just wanted to break things up. But what I meant by break things up, we are definitely going to taste and serve something very, very, very different. Have you ever felt a little bit confused when we say Arabica, Robusta, or possibly Geisha, maybe Pacamara, Eugeniodes? Some of us think they're all same varietals, or not necessarily they're the species. So what I wanted to do with this video, I wanted to give you or serve you very different species of what we normally taste. So what we normally taste and love in specialty coffee, and why I feel we love coffee, it's because we have been drinking Arabica coffees. Now Arabica coffees generally are very sweet, they're very balanced, they're very round, and there's so many different varietals, you know, starting from Typica, Bourbon, Geisha, Pacamara, and on and on and on. Just think of it like an apple. We have a Granny Smith apple, red apple, yellow, smaller, larger, but they're all apples. It all belongs to one family. Now, we also have so many different species. In fact, Arabica is only one out of 120 species that most of us have not tasted, only maybe 2 or 3 species. Another very popular species is Robusta. Now, Robusta generally is a lot more, I feel, a lot more bitter. It's a little bit more sharper. And for my preference, not as desirable or not as tasty coffee, because that bitterness and this sharpness really does not allow a sweetness to come through as nice. And Arabica also has a lot less caffeine than Robusta, for example. But I want to go a step back. I'm not going to be serving you Robusta, so that's fine. I want to be serving you something completely different. And it's actually parent of Arabica. So Robusta and Eugeniodes, which is the species you will be tasting today, are the parents of Arabica, and that's what we drink all day. What's exciting about Eugeniodes is research said that Eugeniodes has a lot less acidity, chlorogenic acid in particular. I'm not a huge fan of chlorogenic acidity. It reminds me of sour, quinic sort of notes, like imagine of drinking tonic water. Really, really bitter, not enough sweetness. Also, Robusta has quite a bit of caffeine. And when we taste caffeine, even from if you go to chemist and taste some of the caffeine in the powder, you'll notice it's really bitter. And many people refer Robusta being a bitter, sharp and sour. So that's one. But then Eugeniodes on the other side does not have any of these elements. So the caffeine is very reduced. It's almost like having no caffeine. Chlorogenic acidity is so much less than what we have in Robusta. So you can possibly expect what we're going to be tasting. So we're going to be tasting coffee that's really, really sweet. Majority of the sweetness that we love in Arabica coffees are coming from this Eugeniodes side, not from Robusta. So in order to explain this a little bit more, we're going to look at this map. All right, so coffee belongs to this huge family, and the family is called Rubiaceae. There's 13,500 of this little genus. Now coffee is one of them, or coffea if I can say. And we have 120 different species in coffea. Arabica and Robusta, which is pretty much everything we drink, it's only 2. Today, as I mentioned, we're going to be tasting Eugeniodes. And I really hope that in the future we can start finding and tasting more of these amazing species. When I've tasted the Eugeniodes for the very first time when I was in Colombia back in 2015, I've tasted a coffee that I've never had more sweetness ever experienced in my life, and it actually confused me. I remember judging that coffee for the first time on a table, and I've had a sip. It was crazy sweet, almost like an equal sugars or stevia. And it had this really lovely florals that I, for the moment, thought that this coffee might be, coming from Ethiopian. But as coffee kept cooling down, acidity kept dropping and dropping and dropping. That when I finished cupping the session after 40 minutes, I had no idea what to score it. I just sort of left the scorch heat and moved on. I'm so excited to be able to share this coffee with you today because throughout the fermentation techniques and the processing, together with Immaculada team in Colombia, they've managed to make this coffee now a lot more balanced, a lot more flavor driven, and a lot more exciting. So today, throughout the Matrix, we're gonna be sharing and exploring some of these amazing elements that it's the coffee that you definitely cannot compare with anything else you've tasted before. Let's do it. This is very confusing. It's very confusing for any coffee professional. It's been confusing for me since I've tasted this coffee, and I'm sure it's going to be very confusing for you. But I think that's a great thing. You know, it's nice that we taste something new or something we have not tasted before. Normally, when we're dialing espresso with the Arabica, normally we're looking for what's wrong at the beginning. We're looking for that possibly high acidity that we might not like, or sharp acidity. Or the other problem can be all the way on the other side, when we extract coffee way too much, it's a little bit too bitter. And the aftertaste or dryness and all of these things are not great. As I mentioned earlier, Eugeniodes has a very, very low amount of chlorogenic acidity. So tasting this coffee, we don't have a problem with the acidity. Acidity is medium to low, it's very sweet. And also, because coffee has so much sweetness, because these bitter compounds are not there, so it's allowing that sweetness to really shine through. It's really hard to see what's wrong initially. So I think the very first sip when you make this coffee, just drink it and enjoy it and see where it takes you. For me, where it's taking me, it's got overwhelming sweetness. This sweetness, it's like stevia, or white sugar or white powder, icing sugar, and it's all over my palate. Even now, I've had it a couple of minutes ago, and even now it's still covering my palate. It's definitely got lower sweetness. The flavors at the moment I'm tasting, a lot of dark caramel, a lot of honey, quite a bit of oolong tea in the texture, and some of the umami notes. Good level of umami notes. So not too much tomatoes, not too much mushroom, but just enough to make this coffee unique, different and complex. I'm gonna have another sip now, and hopefully we can kind of understand with this second sip what's possibly the weakness of the cup and where do we want to go from now on. Quite a bit of chocolate, dark chocolate, umami is coming through, but what's possibly a little bit disturbing is this black tea. It's more like oversteeped black tea, so these tannins are really sitting on my palate. Just think of the white or of the red wine that has a lot of tannins, and they're just lingering there towards the back. So I'd love to reduce that. But as I mentioned earlier, when I've tasted this coffee, when I was in Colombia for the very first time, I managed to get these beautiful floral notes or fruity characters. So I want to try to explore these floral notes as much as I possibly can. So we are going to change a couple things, which I will explain in a moment what's going to be. This very first coffee, what we've done, we've put 20 grams in, 38 grams out in 27 seconds. As you can see here on this chart, sweetness is probably highest I've ever scored or tasted in my life. Acidity is very low, as we mentioned, and we know why, because we have very low amount of chlorogenic acid, very low amount of organic acids, and which is really giving us a benefit that we can have very balanced taste balance. And for the very similar reason, as we mentioned, bitterness is very low because we have very small amount of caffeine in here. So in order to get perfect taste balance with this coffee, it's not really hard. And in my opinion, you can dose 19 grams, 20 grams, 21 grams. You can run it between 20 seconds to 33 seconds. The taste balance, more or less, is going to be very nice. But let's talk about the flavor. I found flavor a little bit closed for this particular coffee, and a lot of dark fruits. We found these beautiful dark caramels, really sticky, quite a bit of dark honey. Oolong tea is beautiful for me, for this expression, probably most favorite flavor profile. Subtleness in umami, more in the tactile, and the black tea. But this black tea, as coffee sat down for minute and a half, started giving us some tannins, which is something I'd love to avoid. And when it comes down to texture, it's really creamy, and as coffee is cooling, it's getting creamy and creamier. Weight is medium to full, and the finish is very long, sweet, and also tannic as well. Some of these black tea tannins are coming through. So what we want to do with this coffee, we just want to, because bitterness is really low, we know we can increase the extraction without having this bitterness dominating. So what we'll do is we're going to still go 20 grams in, but we're going to turn this from 38 out to about 42 out, and we'll keep the coffee at 27 seconds. And by running this coffee another 4 seconds longer, and the reason I would like to increase another 4 grams is I just want to open up the flavors of this coffee, and hopefully we can find some of the lighter compounds, fruity notes, maybe some florals, and this way we can make flavor a little bit more exciting. So let's give it a go. Alright, so to recap this recipe, 20 grams in, 42 out in 27 seconds. We feel like that we managed to push this extraction a little bit too much, and definitely conclusion is that we are not in a good direction. And the reason why is we've dropped the sweetness, we have increased the acidity, and this acidity became really sharp, almost vinegar-like. And I believe that this vinegar is really coming through because this coffee is a natural process coffee. And normally when we dry coffees on the Perios natural process, we attract quite a bit of acetic acid. And it's really exposing the process way too much. So we definitely want to stay on about 38, 39 grams in order not to expose that process so much. Now moving on to texture. Texture became really watery. Coffee is really flat when it comes to the weight, a little bit edgy, velvety, but that edgy wateriness, flatness in the middle of the palate is very obvious. Finish, it became more tannic than before. So tannic and also matcha tea is very dominant, and this long tea, we're not tasting this beautiful long tea anymore, we're just tasting now more over-steeped long tea. When it comes down to flavors, stevia is still present, brown rice is really present now, which I don't particularly enjoy for this coffee. Cacao nib, it's really nibby, it's really sharp, it's giving us this sort of a lot of these bitter compounds that we're tasting at the end. Orange peel, really zesty, but they are two exciting flavors. They're so hidden, but they're really exciting. So we've tasted a little bit of banana, more like a dried banana, and also some of the pineapple, but more like the baked pineapple. Now, what I've done here on this screen is we've managed to tick intensity on these flavors. So obviously we've ticked for tannins like 4 ticks or 3 ticks. For cacao nib, we've also ticked the 3 ticks. So what I mean by ticking one tick, 2 ticks or 3 ticks, that kind of gives us intensity. So if you put something as the 3 ticks, it means it's really intense. So banana and pineapple, we've just done a 1 single tick, which means that it's there in the coffee. What we need to do now is we need to highlight these ticks, because to me they are the most exciting things about a coffee. We definitely know we're not in the right direction, but because we are overexposing the coffee with 42 grams and combination of 27 seconds and 20 grams. With this second coffee, 42 grams out and 27 seconds, we've definitely overstretched the extraction. So what we need to do is we're going to go back to the first one, because we prefer this coffee more than the second one. And then we're going to actually see what are the things that we need to improve here, which is we need to minimize the tannins, and we also want to open up these lighter fruits. And to do that, instead of running a coffee for 27 seconds, we're going to speed it up. But we'll try 2 different speeds. One coffee will run at 16 seconds with the same recipe, 20 in, 38 out in 16 seconds. And another coffee we're going to do 20 in, 38 out in 20 to 21 seconds. And we're really going to hope to find more fruit, more tropical notes, and more goodness in the cup. This was very exciting. We're getting there. Probably one more step, but we know that we're actually getting somewhere. Let's recap. The very first coffee, what we've done, 20 in, 38 out, 16 to 17 seconds. What we found is that sweetness is medium to high, acidity is a little bit more, kind of just a little bit below medium, but we found in this taste balance, this bitterness was a little bit disturbing. It took us a while to actually work out what sort of bitterness we're tasting, because what's interesting with this coffee, even though if you taste maybe flavors or bitterness that's underwhelming, they're all surrounded with this crazy amount of sweetness. So it's really, really hard to actually see and look for the coffee. How do we improve certain component? For example, for me, bitterness is like Kinato, like Italian Coca-Cola drink that's really, really bitter. Or you're probably going to be familiar with Campari. So it's got this nice, interesting notes like Campari, but that bitterness is slightly dominating. So not my favorite sort of taste balance, probably least favorite taste balance, and I'm not surprised, like extraction is super fast. Now when it comes to tactile balance, texture, weight, it's very thin, it's a little bit sandy, like a bit grainy, and the weight is really, really light. It's almost like a drinking of water as opposed to more complex beverage. Finish, we found that we've dropped down the tannins, but what's happened is coffee became more grassy. Quite a bit of grass, quite a bit of green notes, and it's still very sugary. So finish, we've definitely dropped down the tannins, but what's happened is coffee became a lot more grassy on the finish. So imagine, taking the fresh grass and putting it in the mouth. It was a little bit too much grassy notes and very green characters. So definitely really, really bad direction. And these 16 to 7 seconds, it's way too fast. Now we're gonna move on to something more exciting. You can see by my smile that we're getting there. So 20 in, 38 out, 20 to 21 seconds. By far the best coffee we've tasted. Why? Sweetness is beautiful, full, rich, very multi-layered sweetness, brown sugar, stevia, some stone fruits, some cherries coming through in this sweetness. Imagine of opening up the jar of the cherries that's actually glazed in a lot of sugars and just tasting that. And it's lingering and it's rich. Acidity, it's actually that cherry, it's also transforming to acidity. It's very medium to low intensity, but the quality of acidity is amazing. And bitterness, medium to low, hardly any bitterness. When it comes to quality of the bitterness, it's more like a really nice high quality chocolate. Now, tactile, super creamy coffee, medium weight, and the finish, it's slightly bit dry. So not ideally there yet. And also the tactile balance when it comes down to texture, even though it's really creamy underneath, I can taste a little bit of more like a cardboard, which reminds me that coffee is a little bit under extracted. Most exciting part are the flavors. We finally managed to find these amazing flavors. A lot of caramel fudge that's present in the flavor as well as the aftertaste, chocolate, raisins from hot to cool, glazed cherries, which I found really exciting, honey, stevia of course is there, and as I mentioned, the cardboard. Now, in order to move forward, I believe we have slightly under-extracted this coffee. However, I love the ratio because at this ratio, 38 grams out, we found these amazing flavors. So we're gonna lock this in. This is why I have this little cool lock there. Now, I also love this time frame because at this time frame, we don't have issue with the tannins like we had before. Or maybe as we were extracting coffee slower, we got a lot of tannins, a lot of black tea. Or in this case, when we extract the coffee a little bit faster, we got a lot of these green notes and grassiness. So we're gonna lock this as well, 20 to 21 seconds. The way we can balance this, the way we can extract more out of the coffee, the last piece of the puzzle of the matrix that stayed is the gram scene. So of course, by dropping down the dose from 20 to 19.5, we will be able to extract more out of the coffee. And by increasing the extraction a little bit more, hopefully we're going to get rid of the cardboard and this slight dryness and give you that perfect cup of Eugeniodes. Let's make one. We have our final recipe. I must say, when I was tasting this coffee, I actually got quite a few goosebumps. Probably this darling, this moment, this coffee, probably best espresso this year. And I really hope throughout this matrix technique, you can have the same experience, the same feeling as myself. So let's dive in. Let's see what we've done. Recipe we've decided to do is 19.7 in, 37.5 out and 19 seconds. So let's talk what we've tasted. Let's have another one. Okay, coffee is crazy sweet, high sweetness. If I could go any higher than this, I would, because it's one of the sweetest coffee I've ever tasted. When it comes down to sweetness, it's crazy multi-layered. Super round, brown sugar, some cherry notes coming through, a lot of honey in the sweetness, a lot of caramel. Like, it's very well structured with multi-layered sweetness. Acidity, medium to low, just round, rich, cherry-like acidity. But this style of acidity, when you taste it, you really need to look for what actually acidity it is, because unlike with the Arabica coffees where acidity it's present and you notice it right away, when you're tasting this espresso, you need to look for it, you need to find it, and then you understand, wow, it actually really complements the cup so well, but it does not disturb the cup. That's what I love. Bitterness, very low. And sometimes with some of the coffees, when you have a low bitterness, they might seem flat. Definitely not the case with this one. So I actually quite enjoy super low bitterness in the coffee. And even though, now we have a coffee that with a lot of sweetness, medium acid and low bitterness, for me it's harmonious balance of taste balance. Now let's talk about tactile. Texture, round, creamy, rich, some sort of malty notes coming through, a lot of kind of even caramel fudge in a texture, like that really heaviness that you would feel when you're tasting a fudge. Weight, medium plus. Finish, probably my most exciting element, because transition of this finish from hot to cool, it's amazing. Finish is really sweet, really long, but when you have your first sip, you're going to notice like super sweet caramel fudge. But then after 30 or 40 seconds, I recommend you to leave it 30 to 40 seconds between first sip and the second sip. And in the second sip, coffee of course is still going to be very sweet, but you're going to notice these beautiful subtle white florals. It's delicious. And the flavors, there's a lot of stuff going on. You know how we earlier introduced the ticks, so we're gonna discuss a little bit these ticks. So 3 ticks means really intense. Stevia, for me 2 ticks, very intense. Raisin, 3 ticks. I'm tasting raisin from hot temperature to cool temperature, first sip and second sip. Passion fruit, it's beautiful. We've noticed the passion fruit on the nose, on the aroma a little bit, as well as throughout the cup. And passion fruit, its expression of this passion fruit, it's not necessarily just taking the fresh passion fruit, cutting in half and tasting it. Imagine that you're cutting this passion fruit in half, but then you're putting loads of sugars into it, and then you're enjoying it. That's the expression of passion fruit I'm getting. Sweet cherries, milk chocolate, caramel fudge again, and as I mentioned, this white tea finish. I think this coffee is more than just delicious. In order to get best flavors out of it and best balance, I highly recommend after you make an extraction, let it sit for 2 minutes. Serve it in this vessel here, or similar vessel to this. Definitely not the vessel that's very open, because this vessel is going to highlight the best of this beautiful species and best of Eugeniodes. Eugeniodes is, of course, very special coffee, very special species. So I hope after this that you will, understand the difference between varietals and the species. But more importantly, I want to go back to Matrix. In last 5 years, since 2015, I've worked with amazing baristas to dial in best espressos, that I've tasted. With Hugh Kelly in 2017, when he was #1 in the first round, #1 in the second round with his coffee. With Aga following year when she won Best Espresso in the world. With Matt Lewin last year when he won Best Espresso in the first round. We've used this technique. We have not used refractometer, or TDS, or yields. And I'm not saying that doesn't work, but for us, this works. This is the very first time I've dialed in espresso with Eugeniodes, with these 7 coffees. I have not had the opportunity to play with these coffees for too long because it's very rare and very special. And I'm so happy to see for what we've started and what we've ended. Only in 15 to 20 minutes together. And within these 20 minutes, thankfully to Matrix way of thinking and the techniques, we managed to taste one of the best, if not the best espresso I've tasted this year. I hope you can use this technique to get best coffee you've also tasted this year. Feel free to reach out to me when you're dialing these coffees. Find me on Instagram, and I'd be more than happy to talk to you and discuss with you to help you get best out of this coffee and the other coffees that we're selling. I hope to see you next time. Thank you.